tell you, Peter, make sure you do record. I did my practice recording and I used my lavalier microphone. However, I don't know if I plug it in, if you're going to hear me or not.
I hear you.
Does everybody hear me pretty good though?
Yes.
Without it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then I'm not even going to use it. All right, let's get started. Grab your hat. We're ready to go. We're going to take a virtual road trip from Texas to Alaska. And here's my outline. The main purpose is to inspire you folks to enjoy the great outdoors and travel, short trip, long trip, whatever. Maybe you've even imagined what it'd be like to take a road trip on the Alaskan highway all the way up there from Texas and back. So you're going to get that experience through my virtual road trip tonight. Just so you know, I've made 7 visits to Alaska. My first one, it was in 2002. Took a commercial plane up there to Minnesota and then on to Anchorage, got a rent car, did a 3-week tour and camped out in a tent. And it was a lot of fun. Then I saved my money for a little travel trailer. And so in 2010, I hit the road for my first road trip to Alaska. We're going to talk very briefly about my favorite equipment to take for a trip like this. This virtual road trip will be done through some of my favorite bear pictures. We'll talk about some things to consider about your route. There's some advantages and disadvantages to going certain ways. Some thoughts about camping. My favorite locations to photograph bears should be evident when I bring up individual pictures and talk about where I took those pictures. And finally, what I have learned about what to expect from a long road trip like this, since I've done it 6 times. Stories behind some of the images and some personal advice at the end. And if we get through this COVID-19 pandemic and I'm able to travel back to Alaska again in 2021, then you can follow my blog site. There it is, Smith's Uncommon Adventures, WordPress.com. If you'd care to visit my website, there it is, Mountain Wildlife, Zentolio.com. I'm trying to figure out how I go to my next slide here.
Come here. Do you need
Wow. All right.
From somebody.
Anybody have an idea for me how I get to that part?
Maybe a right arrow on your keyboard.
Yeah, I can't find it.
The right arrow.
On keyboard. On keyboard.
Oh, on the keyboard. Okay, let's try that. Oh, there you go. I was trying to do it with my mouse. Okay, here's a picture that I took up in Alaska. You'll see it again later. I printed that in a 16 by 24 gallery wrap photo on canvas. This was at the beginning of my road trip in 2019, and I plan to take it to Homer, Alaska, and give it to someone there so that the locals and the visitors could enjoy it. We're going to talk about bear safety, but I really think this should be called people safety. I found this humorous cartoon, and obviously we've all been told don't mess with the cubs, you know, and here they are, the Anderson brothers are playing with the cub, and mom's looking on. We know that's not going to have a good outcome right there. So just a few things to think about there. First of all, I believe personally that bears get a bad rap. They get a bad PR. All the media you see about bears is, you know, they're vicious, dangerous, horrible killers. And, you know, I have to tell you, first of all, that you're much, much, much more likely to be struck by lightning than to actually be attacked and killed by a bear. But knowing that, and knowing that bears are wildlife and all the other wildlife too. By the way, I've been told that moose are actually a little bit more dangerous than bears. And of course, you got the mountain lions, you got all kinds of stuff. So there's some things to think about, especially when you're hiking or camping. Camping, don't bring food into your tent. Do not leave food on the picnic table. You know, you're just inviting the bears in. And it's like, okay, free food, they're coming for the buffet. When you're hiking, I would recommend that you take some bear spray. Be sure and give it a practice. Make sure you know how to use it. It's pretty simple. Just don't point it into the wind or it'll come right back on you and then you'll be down. But all this time I've been around bears, I've never had to use it. I've only used it just to make sure it's working before I take my hike. I don't usually take a hike looking for bears. although there's been a couple of times where I did. And so when you're hiking, you have your bear spray on your belt, you make noise. It probably would be a little safer if you had a group of people hiking with you. I'm traveling alone, so I don't get the opportunity to do that. However, I see lots of people on the trails, so you make a little noise. And I'll let you know that most wildlife, I find, don't want to be near you. If they're coming down the trail toward you and you're going toward them, and they're probably going to notice you before you notice them, they're going to probably veer off the trail and circle around through the forest and bypass you. However, if you come around a corner and there's a bear in the trail and he doesn't seem to want to bypass you, then I say you relinquish, you back off, and you step aside and let him pass. Or it could be a bison like in Yellowstone or something else as well. All right, I want to give credit to my good friend Dick Boone for taking this lovely picture of me in Montana. Dick, Peter, and his wife Kim and I all got to travel up to Yellowstone Park for the big PPA conference. What a great conference that was. And we enjoyed some spare time photographing on our own and together as a group. So thanks, Dick. Great picture. By the way, that's my 70 to 200 millimeter lens. If you don't know this already about me, it's always been my dream to live in Colorado ever since my parents took me on vacation there. However, it's not my wife Sally's dream. Therefore, I still live in Texas, and I do get to travel and enjoy Colorado and all the other places I get to go. Before you take a trip, if you do decide to take a long road trip like this, I highly recommend you buy the Milepost. It's an extremely detailed planning guide. As you'll notice, this was my 2001 edition because remember, I went my first time in 2002. It's very detailed about where you find the wildlife, where you find camping, where you find motels, where you find restaurants. I would recommend highly if you're traveling alone to take a travel buddy. And so I have Al, I bought him in Alaska, and I got him a little hoodie so that when it's cool up there, he can stay warm. I gave him my little Smokey Bear pin to wear, and on the front of his hoodie, it says Alaska's, therefore his name, Al. The nice thing about having a travel bear buddy like this is, say example, I get lost, Al's not yelling at me. Now, I probably couldn't say the same for my wife. I mean, sorry, Sally, but you know, that would probably be the case if you're traveling with family or friends. Sometimes they get upset because things go wrong or don't go according to plan. So I look over at Al and I just go, he's so cute and so adorable and he's so calm. I just go like, oh, Bear's just telling me that I've got this and I can handle anything that comes up, and I have to make all decisions myself, but I can do it. So there's my first trip, 2010. You can see my first travel bear buddy didn't have any clothes yet. I called him Val because he was purchased on Valentine's Day. I got a bear like that with a big red bow to give to my wife Sally for Valentine's Day, and I liked him so much I bought another one for me. So there's my next trip. I waited 4 more years, 2014. Went back in 2016. You notice the bear has a shirt. My brother works in Cloudcroft, New Mexico. He had a little shirt because they make bears there at the store where he works. So it says Cloudcroft, New Mexico on it. And there's 2017, 18. That's when I decided I would let Val retire and stay home in Texas and take Al with me. And then 2019, and I missed 2020. We all know why. You know, the pandemic put a kink in our plans. But I want you to notice that sign, how they gave it a new paint job. I'm not a fan of the new paint job. I really love the old paint job, but then I'm not in charge of the world, so that's what I get. A fellow from Germany took this picture of me in Wyoming in the Grand Teton National Park. Everybody can recognize this place is Oxbow Bend. I've got my big lens on there and my big heavy tripod, and I'm not taking pictures of bears at the moment. But this fellow from Germany took this picture. So when I got through taking pictures of a huge nest of great blue herons across the river, I walked back up to the parking lot to my car, and this fellow told me he took this picture, and I said, wow, I love that. That's great. He said, would you like to have it? I gave him my email. I thought, oh my gosh, he'll probably forget to send it to me, but he didn't. So this fellow from Germany sent me the picture, and I love it. And by the way, he lives in Virginia now. So very briefly, these are my favorite lenses for bears. Of course, the big lens, I would tell you to keep yourself at a safe distance, but yet be able to pull those bears in tight for a full capture. You need at least a 500 millimeter lens, maybe a 600. This happens to be my 800, so I can be quite a distance and bring them in. But when I'm close to the bears, we'll talk about me flying over to Katmai National Park and Lake Clark, where you get to walk up close and personal with the bears with a group of folks and your pilot. You don't need the big lens, so you take my favorite lens is my 200 to 400 zoom. So that second one is what I use for those shots. It's good to have something in between, like my 70 to 200, and then for my landscapes and my environmental shots, I have my 24 to 70. So let's begin this virtual road trip. I usually take a picture of myself before I leave my home, and I usually hold a picture of a bear or something, and this was my Alaska magazine with a bear in the river at Katmai National Park chasing down the salmon. I need to tell you that it's a very, very long road trip. I read that it's about 3,800 miles. That's 3,800 miles from San Antonio, Texas to Tok, Alaska, which is the first little town you come to across the border. Let's talk about route advantages and disadvantages. I usually leave at the end of May or the beginning of June, and I find that going the West Coast this way right here, the weather is usually excellent. Of course, it's still going to be a little warm here in Texas and the lower levels in New Mexico and Arizona and even southern California. But then you finally get to Sequoia National Park, which I dearly love, those big redwood trees, and Yosemite, of course, but it's crazy crowded there. One of my first years there in Yosemite, I went into the village to get a bag of ice. That's all I needed. And I circled around that parking lot, I don't know how many times, and finally just gave up. I was so frustrated. I decided, let's press on and get on to Alaska. But I regretted that later, and I started thinking it through, and I said, I need to have a better attitude about this. Despite all the people around, I should just endure, get on the trails, and enjoy the park anyway. And of course, Oregon and Washington offer wonderful coastlines. Peter can tell you how much he loves that. And I met him there on one of my road trips. He and his wife, Kim, were there, and we took pictures together, and that's always so much fun. So if you go up that way, you can cross the border right up here in British Columbia. However, you could take our Rockies up through New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and then into Alberta. The disadvantage of going up straight up this way first is you're going to miss some really nice areas like Rocky Mountain National Park here next to Estes Park, Colorado. There's a road high in the mountains, 12,000 feet and above in elevation called Trail Ridge Road. You do not want to miss that part of the park. And you also want to travel over to the west side too to visit that side of the park where the moose are heavily populated. And normally they plow that road and have it ready to get up there by Memorial Day. It could even be earlier, but you have to remember this all depends on Mother Nature and there's no guarantees. So then when you go up here to Grand Tetons, that's not a problem getting there usually, but from Grand Tetons into Yellowstone, you have to get into a little higher elevation and you've traveled quite a bit north already. And one time I was told at the visitor center, I was asking questions and he said, I told him it looked like there was a snowstorm coming. And he says, well, listen, I recommend you go up today. Don't wait till tomorrow. I had planned to go up the next day. I'm glad I took his advice and went through. I ran through some snow and some ice, but I got through. Otherwise, I might have been delayed. Now, when you get up there to Glacier National Park, they have another wonderful mountain highway called Going to the Sun Road. You do not want to miss that. That, to me, is what makes that park, really. You won't see much of the park down below if you don't see Going to the Sun Road. And you should make a stop at Logan's Pass and maybe do some hiking, go see the mountain goats, and you'll see the bighorn rams. Then you can cross the border right here and you go into another national park in Canada called Waterton Lakes Peace Park. It's amazingly beautiful landscape. They have nice camping. They have a nice lodge to go visit, and they have places to eat. And there's only one gas station, so be ready for that. And they have bears. So let's move on, go to Canada now. So I'm thinking I might just bypass those big highways and just get on up to Canada this time, the next chance I get, and go this way to Waterton Lakes. But I also like to go to Banff and Jasper National Parks. They're kind of back to back, and they're both wonderful parks. And just keep your eyes open. You're going to see all kinds of cool stuff there. I usually camp at least one night in the park. And then I go to Hinton, Alberta, where one of my favorite KOAs is, and camp there and get ready to stock up on food and drinks and gas and get vehicles washed and ready to go to the Alaskan Highway. From there, you don't even start the Alaskan Highway till you get up here to Dawson Creek, but make sure you stop there and get your picture with the sign. I would tell you that 200, 300, maybe 400 or more miles of this Alaskan Highway, if you don't see a bear, then obviously you have your eyes closed for the entire trip, because there's plenty of bears for you to see. When you get up here, you go to Fort Nelson and then on to Watson Lake. And Watson Lake, you want to stop there for what they call the signpost forest. And I have placed a small little sign with the name Jack on it. And I placed another sign with Helotes, Texas on it, where I live. And then each year I go up, I scratch in the new year that I'm visiting and get a self-portrait with my signs. But it's fun to walk around and see signs from all over the world. Now you're going to travel through the Yukon Territory for quite a number of miles. A lot of wildlife, some of the biggest moose, bison, they're called woodland bison up there, big, huge grizzlies. Oh my goodness, just be ready. Lots of red fox too, so it's fun. You might have to there are some campgrounds if you want to stop at certain places, but there's roadside places you can pull out and do some dry camping overnight, and sometimes I do that. Then you make your way in to Alaska, and my first stop after you take your picture at the sign at the border is to go to Tok, Alaska, which is right here. And I camp there, and I usually spend a couple of nights, and I go looking for the moose. So they're really well known for the moose in that area. And there's different ways you can travel around the state of Alaska. I have my favorite places and things to do. And probably now what I would prefer to do, which I did in 2019, is head from here, Tok, up to Fairbanks. But before I get to Fairbanks, there's a little community called North Pole. You want to stop and visit Santa's Village and get your picture in Santa's sleigh. Or at least I enjoy doing that. And then in Fairbanks, I camp there. If I know our good friend Brian loves vintage automobiles. So if he hears about this, he'll want to stop in Fairbanks and visit their museum of old vintage automobiles. It's amazingly wonderful. I get ready to go to Denali National Park, which is here. And by the way, keep your eyes open. If you're really, really lucky on a fairly clear day, you might even see the mountain on your drive from Fairbanks to Denali. Well, I have my favorite RV park there. It's just a few miles outside of the park. It's called Denali Grizzly Bear RV Park and Campground. I've got reservations for 4 nights, and I immediately, after I unhook my trailer, go over to the park headquarters and purchase my 2 tickets for taking the bus into the park. You can go all the way back into Kantishna, a big lodge back there, 90 something miles. I generally just go to Eielson Visitor Center, which is really close up in front of the mountain. And that's, I think that's 63, 65 miles or something in. It's a pretty long day you're going on the bus. And there are no guarantees. I have seen people that have traveled up there, probably their once in a lifetime trip, and they come out of the Denali National Park and they're complaining that they didn't see the mountain, they didn't see a bear, they didn't see Dall sheep, they didn't see the things they wanted to see. And so when I learned several years ago that I could buy 2 tickets and the third day would be given to me free, I said free is good. So that's my plan every year now, is to go in and out of that park 3 days in a row. This increases your chances of seeing the mountain and all the wildlife. You never know what you're going to see, and every day is different. When I finish there, I'm kind of worn out from 3 days in and out of the park. Oh, by the way, bad news for us photographers. You're restricted to go only 14, 15 miles inside the park in your own vehicle. And generally, you're going to only see maybe moose during that venture, maybe some caribou down below, but the bears are further into the park. So you have to take the bus, and therefore you have to shoot out the windows of the bus or shoot through the windshield. And of course, you've got other photographers and people, you know, to contend with. So I make friends immediately with people on the bus, on the opposite side of the bus, and in front of me and behind me and everything, to work those windows and to share the windows together to get the good shots. Then I go to Anchorage. That's what I call my home base. Got my favorite RV park. It's close to Denny's where I can get some nice meals. It also has a Sam's Club close by to get the little bit cheaper gas than what you ordinarily pay in Alaska and Canada. And then I get ready to go to the Kenai Peninsula. You go south this way. You can take the road to the left and go to Seward. They have many cruises out of there to go see glaciers and see the wildlife in the Bay of Alaska there, or the Gulf of Alaska. My problem with Seward is that it's a sort of it's a drizzly, cloudy, it doesn't feel good to me being there. I like seeing sunshine once in a while. And it seems like every time I've gone, that's the way it is. So be ready for rain and mud and all that stuff. However, they have a great Chinese food there, restaurant there. So that's a good advantage. They have bald eagles to see on the way down. There's a nest on the way down. However, I mostly go down to Homer, Alaska. So I take the road to the right, and that's where I take my flights out to see the bears up close and personal. We fly from Homer over to Katmai National Park or to Lake Clark. And you'll see some pictures, and we'll talk more about that later. And then I go back to Anchorage, and then I get ready to go to Valdez. This is near Prince William Sound, a gorgeous community. I camp right across the street from the boat harbor. I get my ticket as soon as I get there so that the following morning I'm on the mini cruise, and you go out and see a couple of glaciers. You see the whales and the sea lions and the otters and the eagles, and it's well worth it. It's just, I think it's less than $200 to do that all day kind of a thing. And there's a shorter one and a little bit longer one. I prefer the longer one, the more chances to see things. And then I leave the state and we're on our way back home. Let's talk a little bit about camping. I told you that Dick and Peter and I went to the PPA conference in 2015. I pulled into the RV park where I was going to stay, going in to register, already had my reservation. I got out of my little Honda Element at the same time as the fellow pulled up next to me in his big motorhome. He asked me how much I paid for my little travel trailer, which at that point was a MyPod, very comfortable little trailer. And I said, I saw what he was driving, so I said, well, tell me what you paid for yours first. And he said, oh, a little over $1.5 million. I said, well, I paid about $6,000 brand new for my MyPod. And I can't afford that big motorhome, nor would I want to drive something like that anyway. I can just see all sorts of complications. And I don't go on these trips to watch television and stuff like some folks do anyway. By the way, you could get a television for a little MyPod if you wanted, but I don't have one. All right, so camping at the RV parks, you get your electricity for your lights, for your air conditioner if you need it, and for the cooler climates, I have a little portable heater that I use. I have a nice sleeping bag. I have plenty of stuff. Let's talk a little bit about complications. I hate to make reservations well in advance because I never know where I'm going to be exactly. But I usually try my best nowadays, knowing how fast these parks fill up, to call at least a day or two ahead of time if I can. And I called the Seattle KOA because I'm a member with KOA, so I spend a lot of time at KOAs. And they told me that they were all booked up. There was some big special event. I don't recall if it was a big rodeo or something, but they said, if you don't mind parking in our driveway out front of the office, you know, without electricity, you'll have access to the restrooms and the showers. And I said, that'll work. I love dearly to camp in the backcountry forest. There's a lot of national forest areas. Some of them are a little difficult to get to. So it's better if you have all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. Sometimes there's lots of potholes, and it's a little rugged getting in and out, and some of the roads go almost straight up. But it is so much fun to be back in there with the trees and away from most of the folks. There's some other people camping with you. I think everybody in the club understands that bears are my favorite subject, and this is one of my favorite stops. It's the Tom Mengelson Nature Gallery in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. You got to stop there and go into his gallery and see his lovely nature pictures and his wildlife shots. That bear in the front window there behind me is 199. He has made her so famous. And by the way, I just heard she had 4 cubs again this year. I'm thinking she's like grandma age. So I don't know how she ended up having 4 more cubs again this year. And I don't know how many more good years she has, but I'm thankful that her picture's in the window. That's why I like to take the picture. I've had Peter take my picture there, but I usually have to use my tripod. You can see the reflection here in the window with my 24-70 on self-timer. Here's the official beginning of the Alaskan Highway in Dawson Creek. So you want to make time to stop and get this picture of yourself, your traveling buddy, and your vehicle and your trailer if you have one. Now let's talk about taking pictures of bears. I hope this is not your first picture of the bear, but I still recommend that you take the picture anyway. We all understand how important eyes are when you're taking portraits of people or wildlife, but you take the picture because this is your first bear that you see. You want to check your exposure to see how that looks. Then your mind should immediately start thinking, which direction is the bear moving? What is the bear doing? Where is the sun light coming from? What is the background? What is the foreground? Then I say, if you've got a nice subject, if you like that bear, stick with the bear for a while till you get the shot you want. I see so many people drive up, take their snapshot, down the road they go, and that's all they get. In Banff National Park in Canada, I was the first one to spot this black bear on the top of the tree. I had never seen a bear in a tree before. It was so exciting for me to see him at the very, very top. And he's just reaching out and he's breaking limbs and he's just munching on the leaves. I spent about an hour and a half across the highway with my big lens getting shots of him up there and enjoying his company with people just driving past me, going north and south, not even hesitating to slow down. I guess they thought I was taking pictures of birds or something. Anyway, finally a huge crowd developed after about an hour and a half, and I got to see him come down. So enjoy the little cubs. This is one of their favorite meals, are the dandelions. And you probably understand, if you've been around me much at all, to know that I'm a pretty serious kind of fellow. But like my father, I do have a sense of humor, and I get together with my brother and we try to come up with captions for some of my images like this one sometimes. My daughter loves that one. She has that in her home. Maybe you'll get lucky and you'll get a bear with a wet coat from the rain, or maybe one in the wildflowers. Maybe you'll see the huge, large grizzly bears in the Yukon Territory, like I saw one evening when I was traveling really late at night. I don't ordinarily travel that late, but my trailer popped off the hitch in Whitehorse, Yukon, and it made me nervous, and I wanted to get to Alaska as quickly as possible and get that problem settled. I did get the trailer hitched back on, and I drove slowly for a while and then decided I could make it. Finally pulled over a few miles before the border late at night, but before I did, I saw 3, 4 of these big grizzlies. Now I'm totally exhausted from a very, very extra long day, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out the exposure, even though in Alaska and Canada in the summertime, you get 20, 21 hours of daylight. So it's ideal for us photographers. So the first 2 or 3 bears, I couldn't quite do it, and I was just tired anyway. And then I finally saw this blonde grizzly bear, and I said, listen, I'm gonna take more time and try to get a shot of this bear. And a lot of times you don't have much time, and you can see that the bear is mostly hidden. Well, good news, I got the exposure right. Bad news, I didn't get the metering. I don't recall for sure if I had it on spot focus, but I probably should have if I didn't. And I should have made sure it was right on that bear if I really wanted him in focus. So that's why he's out of focus. But I'm glad I got the shot anyway. It's a good memory. 79 miles south of Anchorage is a place you just really are going to have a good time if you stop at the Alaska Wildlife and Conservation Center. And this is pretty much my favorite bear picture. I decided to blow this thing up in a gallery wrap, photo on canvas, 40 inches by 60 inches. And it takes up most of my wall. And it's right here in this office where I am now. I'm looking over here to my right and looking at it. And I can get, let's see, I got about maybe 4 other small pictures around it, but otherwise it takes up most of the space. But I want to find out, does my camera hold up to big print? It held up just perfectly. So there at the Conservation Center, you pay a minimal fee, and especially if you're a senior like me, you pay a little less. And you try to get there when they open up. I don't remember if it's 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, something in that time frame, and get in there, be one of the first ones in, and get to watch the fun behavior of the bears and get all kinds of interesting pictures. This is that same bear that was in the pond that I loved, and he happened to be taking a little nap before the crowds developed. You have an opportunity for some close-ups, some other bear behavior. And I found out that bears dearly love to be in the water. And I think for one reason they get in to cool off when it's warm. They may do it because of the insects, to get away from the insects, but they truly love having a good time and playing in the pond. Let me take you to Denali. They have 3 welcome signs. This is my favorite, of course, because it has the bears. They have another one with Dall sheep and caribou, because that's kind of what the park is mostly known for. And this is an image I got in 2016 from our bus, by the way. I'm shooting out the window. Now, your bus drivers are most awfully nice and will pull over if they can when they see an opportunity for you like this. You can see what I put on the picture there, that only about 30% of all park visitors actually get to see this mountain because it makes its own weather and it's usually covered in clouds. You can see some small, tiny little cloud developing right there. And as you get further back in, closer to the Allison Visitor Center, more clouds may develop. So you never know what it's going to be like when you get back there. But I'm glad I got this one, full view of the mountain, and you've got the bus traveling in the road. Let's take a look at this short video and get a feel for what it's like on the bus. Now, as far as bears go, you may or may not see bears. You may see bears
Sitting right here, so I entered it right
a
away.
few miles away. So therefore, it's good to have a big, long telephoto lens to get a shot like this. If you're lucky, and if you go in and out of the park as much as I have, there's going to be some times where the bears are right walking along the edge of the road near you, and you shoot out your bus window and get a close-up. Perhaps they're walking on the gravel roadway right in front of your bus. That's a pretty exciting time for all the visitors. Let's go down to the Kenai Peninsula to Homer, Alaska. If you're a fisherman, this is a great place for halibut, and the rivers have plenty of salmon when the salmon are running, so be ready for those. My trip to Katmai National Park to see the bears at Brooks Falls and watch them catch the salmon, I usually fly Bald Mountain Air out of Homer. One of my early visits there, I was walking on the Homer Spit, and we'll talk more about what that is later. There are lots of gift shops and restaurants and things. But there was this storefront and it advertised viewing and photographing bears. So I walked in, talked to the nice lady, told her I was interested, found out how much it costs, and she said, well, we're kind of all booked up for tomorrow, but are you going to be around a few days? So I'm one person. They probably could have found a seat for me maybe 2-3 days in, but I had already planned to leave Homer. So I took her card, said I would give her a call and I would come back the next year. So this is our pilot. He's taxiing out on Beluga Lake before his takeoff. This is what the plane looks like taking off above the lake. I got this, of course, obviously I'm not in the plane at this point. I took this the day before I took my flight. And oh my goodness, don't forget to take your wide angle lens because, you know, here I am thinking I need a long lens for the bears. And I never imagined how wonderful these pictures could be out of the plane. So there's Beluga Lake. That is Homer Spit. This body of land that's right here that extends outside of Homer out into the Gulf. And that's where all the shops and restaurants and things are. I can't believe I got this shot and the next one coming after it, but I think I was on a Cessna. I could have been on Bald Mountain Air. Sometimes if the wind is blowing a different direction than it normally does, they have you go over and park at the lake over there or the opposite side. And generally speaking, this is Brooks Camp down here. And this is where you get your bear training. They won't let you hike down the trail until you have your bear training, no matter how many times you've been through bear training. Always frustrates me, like I already know what to do about bears, but I got to go through it. But all the planes line up along the shoreline right here, and you hike along the shore, and you come in here and get your bear training. You hike down the trail, and then you get to this bridge. If there are no bears in the vicinity, the rangers will allow you to quickly move across the bridge, and there's a viewing platform here so you can see the bears up the river this way and along the coast, the shoreline over here. And then you have, I think it's about 1.5 mile hike with your big lens and your tripod and whatever other cameras you have. And you hike through the trees, excuse me, and then you finally get back there. But here's another view right over the Brooks Falls. You can see the falls right here. This is where the bears line up. This is where the salmon are trying to leap over, get back where they were born and lay their eggs. You can see fishermen down the river. There's one here and 3 down here. The bears do walk up the river. They come out of the trees, and sometimes they're in this area where you are, and they come under the deck. There's an upper viewing deck here and a lower viewing deck down here. When you finally get through your long hike, you come to a point where you meet a ranger and you have to put your name on the list. There's so many people that visit there. And then they let you go to the lower deck, and it's crowded there, by the way. So you have to kind of like force your way in there somehow. But it's a pretty good viewing area. You can see most of the fall area and up and down the river. But you can't see the prime spot for the favored spot of bears up here on the left side. So we got a welcoming committee of one, my very first trip. We all were getting off of our plane, and they were handing backpacks and cameras and stuff, and I was waiting for my 200 to 400 lens to be handed to me, and this bear is walking along the shoreline next to our plane, greets us. Fortunately, I had my 70 to 200 and my 24 to 70 on my belt already. So I backed up with my 24-70 and got this second shot. Luckily, after bear training, I heard there was a cub up a tree at Brooks Camp, and I took my time getting a nice shot of that bear. Lots of people just headed on by, didn't even want to stop and look at the cub. Here's what the trail looks like, and you see there's plenty of bear activity signs along the way, a couple of bear scat things, and you see some scratching on the trees here. And over here is the bridge area, the elevated bridge. Once you cross, you have this platform to shoot from and watch the bears, and they're right down below. I tend to want to go on and get on out there and get my name on the list so I can get to the lower platform and take pictures like this. You can see there's a bear right here on the shoreline in the grass watching the other one catch the fish. When you finally name call and you get to go up to the upper platform, there's, I believe, 3 tiers, one a little lower, one in the middle, and one a little higher. But the problem I have with my big 200 to 400 here is oftentimes people put their heads right in front of your big lens or their caps, or they'll even hold up their iPhones getting a picture or a video or something and kind of destroy your chance to get your bear shot. You have only 1 hour on that upper deck. You may find bears or you may not. On a typical good day, you're likely to see 10, maybe even a dozen bears. And those are the kind of good days that I've been fortunate to see. However, you can tell this one day, all you see are scraps. That tells me that the bears are full and they're not ready to come back and catch more fish. And those salmon are obviously really happy not to have to confront a bear trying to leap those falls. So there's a tight shot that I took, and you can see 6 bears right in that tight shot. There's more in the river. There's more maybe under the deck where I am. So it was kind of a typical day of 10 to 12 bears. But I heard that as many as 43 bears have been sighted at Brook Falls in a single day. I haven't been that fortunate yet. Here's success for the salmon. I don't quite understand why this favorite spot is being taken over by 2 bears. That's not the norm. There's usually only 1 bear. They fight the rest of them off. So my guess is this is either a couple that is romantically involved, or perhaps they're related in some way, and that's why they're tolerating one another. Okay, it's your turn. Really? And the other bear comes back, and finally you get a turn. Down below us on this trip in 2016, Sal, mom and her 3 cubs, she was digging up grubs and insects in the ground along the shoreline, and I got to get these fun shots of the cubs. So let's do the video portion so you can get a feel for what that's like. Now down in the river, the fishing is pretty good too. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. This bear is getting a better look downriver at the other bears coming their way. Fishing is okay in the river as well. This is one of the larger bears of the 2,200 brown bears that are known to be in Katmai National Park. Some sparring cubs along the bank. Bear watching the photographers on the viewing platform. When it's time to return to your plane and fly back to Homer or Anchorage or Soldotna or wherever you flew in from, you're likely to see a bear or 2 on the beach again. The rangers, more than likely, are going to stop you and try to wait till the bear is clear and let you get back to your plane. So be ready for that. This is another visit to Lake Clark National Park, and it's not quite as long a trip as it is flying over to Katmai. So I kind of like that. I get to the park quickly and get right into seeing the bears. Bald Mountain Air, I didn't know, went anywhere besides Katmai, but they found a few little lakes or rivers they could land on with their pontoon plane. So this was one of my favorite shots. We hiked back through the grass, and oh, by the way, there were plenty of lupins. You can probably see one right there in the foreground. And we were all sitting on the side of the hill looking at lots of bears down in the meadow, but they were really, really far away, so it couldn't get the kind of shots that I like to get. But someone in our group noticed this mom and her 3 cubs heading our way, and then a boar started following her. He was pursuing her, and so mom wanted to get her cubs to safety, so she came up the hill right beside our group. Pretty exciting. A little scary for some of the folks, but me, I was like, all right. So this is how I got the cub to look right at me, and mom got them safely away from the boar. Another trip in a Cessna plane, I take it from the plane of the bears down there that are digging up clams, and I get out of the plane, take another shot. You see the bears out there. Then I try to get one of the photographers and the pilot when we get up closer to the bears. And this is one of the amazing shots I got. Mom she was teaching her cubs how to clam, and then she decided, okay, I'll let you cubs nurse a little bit. So she was lying back down, and we all got excited. We thought, oh boy, this is something different. Almost immediately, she jumps up, standing very tall, and so does one of her cubs beside her because a bear was coming her way. You can crop your image for more impact. I love it cropped, but me personally, I like the other one too because it shows that environment where I was. You might get a shot of, can you guys see all of that image? I'm seeing people on the side that are blocking that shot.
Well, I don't see that.
Do you see the whole rest of the bear? Do I need to make it smaller or something?
I see the whole
You can
bear.
see all of it.
You do see it?
If you can't see, you can click on those rectangles up on
Okay,
the
but
right.
that might be too small, isn't it? Is that too small for you there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd rather go back to full,
Better.
if I can get back there. Let me see. Oh no, now what have I done?
I think in the lower right-hand corner, there is an arrow.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is. Okay, now we can get back. Sorry. I just didn't think you could see the front of that because I was seeing all the people on the right
You
blocking.
can get rid of the people on the right, but clicking one of the smallest
Well, apparently
rectangle.
I just did. So these are the kinds of shots you can get. Maybe the eyes looking at you, the claws. I smile when I see this one because this little cub was trying her best to get those clams, and she was using not only her claws, but her whole face and nose to dig those clams. You've seen that one in competition. I called it Abbey Road. This was where mom was headed back to the meadow and the cubs were following. Protect the plane. Well, the bears are not protecting the plane, by the way. This was a second pilot that his group joined our group observing the bears and photographing the bears. And we noticed these bears were heading back close to his plane. So we all decided we would walk back there so that they wouldn't mess with the plane. They've been known to do some damage occasionally. And you don't want that happening to your plane and you can't get home. So this is another trip. I try to take a self-portrait when I get up to the shoreline with the bears out there. You can see them out there. And the tide is low, so it's ideal for us to walk out there with our leggings. On this particular trip, got lots of pictures of them clamming, but we walked back into a forest area. There happened to be a little bench to observe bears way out in the meadow, really far away. I didn't expect to get much of anything, but the pilot said he noticed this mom and her 2 cubs coming up close to us. I believe this was her favorite spot to nurse her cubs. She felt safe away from the other bears, and she very well was aware that the 4 of us were sitting there on the bench. The pilot, who was a photographer as well, was sitting closest to the bears, and he was taking pictures. And there was a couple from California sitting between the pilot and me on the other end of the bench. So maybe I was 10 yards away to get this shot. The cubs, however, I don't think were aware that we were there until they finished their nursing session. And then they must have noticed us and got startled and climbed the tree. And that kind of upset mom. So she's distressed here. She stood up and she's facing the pilot photographer and she's given a gruff Not so much that she's afraid of the people, but she's just afraid of what her cubs might do. And she is letting us know. So at this point, well, of course, we look at each other and go like, time to get back to the plane. So we stood up, backed up slowly, got on the trail, headed back to the plane. Besides Alaska and Canada, there are other places to get bears. You already heard me talk a little bit about the Tetons and Tom Mengelson, how he made Bear 199 famous. And I know you've seen this picture before. I was just getting landscape pictures at Swalbacher's Landy. I just love this place, and I told Peter and everybody I know about this place. And I always go back there. And I had the ducks in the foreground, so I was happy. But all of a sudden, I see the bear running from this direction over here, and it stands up. Well, I didn't have my big lens. It's up the trail in my car. So that's why you get the landscape. But that's okay. That's an environmental shot. Those are important to get. I very rarely go hiking actually looking for bears, but every time I've been to Grand Tetons, I never see bears, hardly ever see bears on the road. And I always heard there are lots of them near Jenny Lake. So I decided to take the hiking trail around the lake, and I had to carry my 200 to 400 with my tripod. I get back into this area and I see this mom black bear with her little cub, and they're in the forest, and I can't get a good picture. And I'm thinking in my head, oh, please, Mom, step out onto the little trail so I can get at least one shot. She did. I call that Smith luck. Bang, got my nice shot. I grabbed my iPhone. I was ready to do video and get maybe Mom and the cub, but a very large group of teenagers with their chaperones jumped in front of me and my camera and ended any more picture taking. Yellowstone, of course, has bears. Lots of people in Yellowstone. Sometimes they're really far away, like maybe 2 miles, and you can't hardly even spot them with your eye. So what happens is you have an overlook, and you have people with spotting scopes. They're mostly looking for the wolves in Lamar Valley in Yellowstone, but some of them are looking for the big grizzly bears. And these people found the bear. I looked through the scope, saw the bear where it was, got my big scope, big lens out, and I was having trouble finding that bear through my big lens. Finally, I pinpointed where he was, and this is the environmental shot I got. So that's kind of cool. This is in Yellowstone also. This was on a day with Dick and Peter. This was on a day where I was on my own, and we were all there in the park, and we were all doing our own thing. And I had in my head that I wanted to practice getting, say, a bald eagle in flight. So I was looking for bald eagle down the Madison River, and I saw a lady sitting in a lounge chair along the river. So I talked to her. I said, "You haven't seen any eagles flying up down the river, have you?" And she said, "No, but I saw one back at the meadow near the Canyon Village area, and it was because there was a big carcass there. As a matter of fact, let me show you my pictures of the wolves next to the carcass." She had really fill your frame shots of wolves there, and she had a point and shoot, nice long zoom camera to get those shots. So my plans changed, obviously. I thought, okay, fine, the eagle might be over there, but obviously there's got to be something else. I waited for 5 hours with a long line of photographers, and many photographers left, came back, said, "Did we see anything?" No, we hadn't. They left again. 5 hours later, the grizzly shows up and puts on a nice show right before sunset, right before it got dark. So we had fun watching them, though. In Yellowstone, I found another photographer with a big lens, and I found out he had a sow and her cubs, so that's how I got this shot. All right, this was in 2014, one of my early trips, and I'm not used to, knowing much about bears and stuff, and I'm in Yellowstone, and I'm talking to people, and they tell me they have come from the opposite direction, the direction I'm going to be traveling in, and they saw a bear. They thought it was a grizzly bear because of the color of this bear. I'm telling you, this is a black bear. There is no hump on that bear, so this is a black bear. It's called a cinnamon colored black bear. Black bears come in black, cinnamon, and blonde. So that's kind of fun. And it's enjoying a meal of deer or elk. Maybe maybe you can pinpoint for me what it really is, but there's not much left, as you can see. I get to this point where everybody's parked alongside the highway, and they tell me the bear's back in there with the trees. And I'm going like, oh man, I don't know if I want to walk back in the trees with a bear. So then a fella comes out and he says, oh, you can circle around the bear and get back in there and get a good picture. So reluctantly, I hiked around that bear. Good news, there was another photographer back in there. So I felt like, well, at least we sort of have each other's back. Not really, but you know, there we are. So I waited for the bear to raise its eyes and got this picture and then circled and got out of there. I don't normally take risks like that. You need to stop at the Alaska Zoo in Anchorage, and this is where you, who knows, you might get this Smith luck kind of shot like I did, and for more impact, crop it real tight. There you go. There are bears in Haines, Alaska, and it's a lovely community to visit. I was watching this bear and her cubs across the river, and I found a bunch of tourists watching from the other side. So I got that environmental shot. Let me give you some final advice. This is Grand Tetons again. This is the overlook for the Ansel Adams famous picture of Snake River leading into the mountains. And you can see a picture of Ansel on his vehicle, on his platform with his big camera. Oscar Wilde gave this quote, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken." So that's my feeling. You do not have to be Ansel Adams. You do not have to be Tom Mengelson or Art Wolf or anybody else you know. Just be yourself and enjoy what you enjoy doing. When you're traveling the Alaskan highway, you got to be ready. You got to understand that this is the only time they can do your job. So be ready for potholes, be ready for a lot of gravel, bumpy roads, delays, rain, mud, the works. Something unexpected that you didn't anticipate could happen, like a flat tire happened to me. Logan Pass in Glacier National Park, just about sunset. There were still people, thank goodness. I hobbled into the parking lot here. Immediately went to look for rangers. Of course, they're nowhere to be found. Nobody seemed too interested in helping me. I went back to pull out stuff from my vehicle and get the spare tire out. This gentleman in this gorgeous shirt he has on right here parked next to me, and he was taking a road trip sleeping in his car, I found out later. But he saw what I was doing, offered to help me get stuff out, and then he recruited this entire family of 6 that pulled up in a vehicle behind my van here and asked them, he said, "You guys are young and strong. Why don't you help us change this tire?" So I said, "Let me get a picture of all you to remember there are good people in this world." Thank you, folks. You might get injured. My wife's always worried I'm going to fall off the mountain. I haven't yet. I do get close to the edge sometimes to get some pictures, but I try to be pretty careful. I was actually in Oregon when I got this injury. The night before I leave to go to a new location, I hook up my vehicle to my trailer so that in the morning, in the dark usually, or just at first morning's light, I'm leaving the campground and heading somewhere else. Well, I had my Honda Element back then, and it didn't have a backup camera like my van does. So I'm slowly backing up, and I bumped my little trailer, which was an A-Liner A-Light, about weighed 500 pounds, about like my MyPod does now. I bumped it, it started rolling, so I panicked thinking, oh my gosh, it's gonna roll down the hill and smash somebody's car or their trailer. So I'm trying to run and catch my trailer and slow it down and maybe stop it before it does that. Of course, there's a big root from a tree that I stub my toe on, and I immediately go down and I jam my left hand into a very sharp rock. I had a safe, a first aid kit, but it was pretty minimal. So I walked around the campsite. I found a big reunion of people, all one big family, and there happened to be a doctor. He bandaged me up and took good care of me. Smith luck again. One time flying over to Katmai, I used sunscreen because it's quite sunny most of the time, and I used mosquito repellent because there are mosquitoes up there. And it was a really warm day for Alaska. It was in the lower 80s, maybe the upper 70s. That doesn't sound hot for Texas, but when you're hiking with a big lens and a tripod, and you're a person like me that perspires, my left eye just almost immediately was closed, and I had to take all of my pictures out of my right eye. And the pilot tried to wash my eye out with water. So be careful of that. This is not my picture, but I found it, and it serves the purpose of telling you about the rule that I have now. I have a rule called the 360 rule. I get really, really focused on the bears or whatever it is I'm taking pictures of, and I tend to forget about what else is around me at the time. I have found a bear coming up behind me on a trail one time. I found cattle in Texas come up and put their noses right in my back. So now, every few seconds, I spin around, see if anything's coming up behind me or to the left or to the right of me. You know, those people that just come up and take the snapshot and off they go, they get an okay picture, but I want something a little different sometimes. So if I find a nice subject matter, I spend some time there. When I do spend time with bears like that, other people tend to come along and they join in for a little bit, but if you're patient, and let's say they scare them away and they go into the brush. If you're patient, as soon as those people drive away, a few minutes later, that bear will likely come out again and you get more chances. So here's real important advice for you. Back up and safeguard your valuable images, your family, photographs, your business, and your pleasure stuff. I bought 2 fireproof, waterproof safes, and as you can see, I'm storing my favorite Alaska photographs on flash drives here. You can also use the small external hard drives that are like 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte. They make them small enough now to get into this safe. My brother took this picture at the public library where he works in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, on one of my trips where I'm working on my blog. There again, you can follow me if I go to Alaska 2021, Smith's Uncommon Adventures, WordPress.com. We finally reached the end. I'm going to see if I can close this out somehow. Anybody know where that arrow is? Oh, goodness. Oh, here it is. Here's one. Oh, that's just going to take me back, though, isn't it?
What are you going to do? You want to stop sharing?
I just want to close it out. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, at the very top. If you put your mouse up to the top.
Yeah, I got it there.
Way up
Okay.
higher.
Well, okay, I found an X, so at least I can X out of that. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I don't know if anybody put questions in the chat area. I see the number 2, and I see from Ken, it says, my grandparents made several road trips to Alaska also. I'm not sure which route they took, but I think maybe they've been through the Rockies. I remember them telling about how bad the roads were and how it would eat up their tires. Did you experience that with having to take extra tires? No, I found that, you know, I thought about taking a spare tire for my trailer maybe, and maybe even for my vehicle, but I have so much stuff I'm taking on this road trip, and the camera equipment is so important to me, and having something to eat and drink and all those other things. I just didn't have room, and I just took the chance. The road is so much better today than it was in the older days. So you'll find that the highway itself is really, really nice. It's just the construction areas you have to slow down and stop and have some delays. How much should one count on spending to take a trip? Oh boy, like the one you described. Well, that's part of the problem. This is a costly road trip. It's costly. You know, it could be more costly though if you had that big motor home or if you stayed in a motel instead of camping. But the main expense I have is, well, of course you have gasoline, and you have flight expense. And now that I've decided I don't want to just make one flight over, if I'm going all the way up there, I want to go over to both parks and increase my chances of getting more neat pictures. So taking a flight in a Cessna or Bald Mountain Air with their float plane, it's going to generally cost you around $700. I'm going to guess they're probably raising their prices again. When I started out doing this, it was under $700, but it's probably over that now for one person. And you get 1 day going and coming. Now there is the option of flying over there. You have to make reservations at the campground at Brooks Camp, and you can, spend some nights there in a tent, which I think would be ideal for me, because then I could get over to those platforms before all those planes arrive and get pictures with all the people crowding me there. All right, you showed 4 cameras with the lenses. Did you really take 4 cameras with you? This is another point. I've spent a lot of my money on camera equipment, as you can tell, because I dearly love the wildlife and especially the bears. So the big lens was really important. Fortunately, I have had some inheritance from elderly relatives that have passed away. And when I got that money, I just thought, well, this is a sign. I can get a big lens now. And Peter can tell you when I bought my, okay, first of all, you probably need at least a 500 millimeter, maybe 600. You don't have to have the 800 like I do. But since I came into more money and I read how wonderful that lens was, I thought, okay, it's meant to be. So that's why I have that. And yes, I do have all those different bodies. My favorite, of course, is the top of line D5. I have the D800. If I had a lot of money now, which I don't have much anymore, I probably would buy the D850. It sounds like an excellent Nikon camera. But I do have the D500, like Dick Boone has, and I like what I like about that. That'll give you some more reach, and it's almost like having a D5. So, yeah. I have different bodies and different lenses, and they're already ready to go. That way, when I see something down the highway, I don't have to mess around with putting a lens or whatever on. I'm ready to go. And I have them all close by. Are there any other questions that people wanted to ask? Thank you all for being here tonight. If you think of other things you wanted to know, or if you decide to make a road trip up there, you can always call me, or if you like, we can have our own Zoom meeting, one-on-one. Thanks, everybody, for being here tonight. How many do we have, Peter?
Let me see. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.
Perfect.
Okay, let me just make